The first time Ned Stark laid eyes on the shifting patterns in Bran's dreams, he felt a cold wind in his bones, a warning that something unnatural stirred. Night after night, those visions came, snatches of history, whispering shadows, faces long dead walking in memory. At first he dismissed them as the fevered dreams of a crippled boy, but then the images sharpened. He saw Rickard Stark kneeling before Aerys Targaryen's flame. He saw Howland Reed refusing to break in the Tower of Joy. He saw Lyanna Stark dying in childbirth, cradling a newborn. The past was no longer a fixed tapestry. It trembled like silver water disturbed by a stone. And Ned came to understand that his son could view every secret corner of Westeros's history, and perhaps, if guided, could rewrite its story. He resolved, in whisper and silence, to steer those visions toward truth. He would not let lies dominate the memory of the realm, lies that empowered cruel nobles, masked sins and hid betrayals. If Bran could see what truly transpired, Ned would whisper into those dreams, planting the seed of correction. It would be subtle, an adjustment here, a question there. He knew he could not shout from the wind. Only Bran would carry the change, so he began testing. In the solitude of Winterfell's Godswood, Ned crept beneath moonlit boughs and placed his hand on the weirwood's bark, murmuring quietly of the life he had led, the vows he had kept. When Bran slept, the child's mind wandered. Ned nudged the path. He guided Bran to linger longer on the Tower of Joy, to observe the blade of Arthur Dayne just a half-beat later to see Howland's dagger twist, and slowly, subtly, the misremembered past began to shudder. When Robert Baratheon marched south to dethrone Aerys, Ned's secret hand was already at work. He hurtled through visions of Mad King's cruelty, highlighting the pyres, the laughter in the throne room. Bran saw the hidden caches of wildfire beneath King's Landing. He watched Aerys's whispered oath to burn the city rather than yield. The lies that had grown in whispered rumor now trembled under the weight of memory. Words that had been forgotten came alive in Bran's sight. Ned whispered again, this time in dreams of crouching maesters, loyalists in torn cloaks, the realm's chroniclers, the small folk who spoke in taverns, the old wives who murmured legends. None could mute what emerged in Bran's visions. Across Westeros, rumors stirred. Maesters at the Citadel found passages in ancient tomes suddenly clarified, footnotes rearranged. The histories as known, Robert's rebellion, Rhaegar's honor, Lyanna's fall, all began to shift in subtle tone. Rival houses that had counted on old misdeeds to shame their enemies found those misdeeds questioned. The Lannisters, whose wealth-sealed secrets looked uneasy when aged parchments began to contradict their tales. The Reachlords saw that the memory of the Mad King's cruelty had grown sharper, diminishing the soft legend that some Targaryens had been just. In small inns, bards' songs changed lines. Aerys burned his faith, not just his enemies. The Stormlands whisperers recited new stanzas. No one understood why, only that history no longer sat still. At King's Landing, Ned feigned absence, said he travelled north often, but in the dead of night, he stood in the cold shadows near Old Town's spires, reaching through Bran's dreams. He would lean into those vision mists and whisper of the Varys that passed letters, of the king's contempt for those he claimed to protect. He would guide Bran to dwell on the small betrayals, the arrests of Roderick Castle, the cruelty of the Mountain's shadow. He wanted the realm to see not only the great battles, but the lava under their feet. He nudged Bran to stretch his gaze toward the north, to see how the Starks had once honored vows. He unfurled images of the old Bear Island, of House Mormont's loyal flame. In every vision, Ned wove a thread of honor, Stark honor, as a spine through the unraveling past. Bran, under Ned's influence, began to dream differently. He saw Catelyn not merely as the grieving wife, but as a queen in exile, pushing through floods to wed alliances, daring the Riverlords to hold fast. He saw Robb not just as a young wolf, but a king walking broken halls, carrying his brother's ghost in his heart. He saw Sansa's voice rising in courts before she understood its strength. All these emerged in the floods of memory, and every time Bran awakened, Ned's influence lingered like tremor in stone. But the power to rewrite memory drew attention. Cersei Lannister, her hair like autumn flame, heard murmurs among her spymasters. She sensed the shift. Documents that once discredited her father or placed him in shame now read different lines. She saw that some letters presented to the small council had been altered by invisible hand. She confronted Meisters. "Who changes our chronicles?" she demanded. But no one spoke. The power that rewrote history hid behind mist and mind. She sent assassins to silence scribes, to burn records in hidden shelves. But each time a ledger turned to ash, another copy appeared elsewhere, its margin amended, its footnote corrected. Suspicion rattled the spines of power, and nowhere was suspicion sharper than in King Robert's court, when Tyrion-Lannister realized the record of his father's cruelty looked altered. Tyrion studied parchments by candlelight, matched them to old memory. He saw discrepancies, small, yes, but meaningful. He suspected the hand of a mind beyond the page. Meanwhile, Ned felt the weight of unseen authority. What began as a secret act grew into a burden. The more he guided, the more the past cried out. He watched as alliances rewrote themselves in the vision plane, the Tullys doubting their kings, the Greyjoys remembering old promises, the Baratheons questioning Robert's claim. The entire realm's memory threatened to fracture. Ned wondered whether he had overstepped. But then he recalled, memory is power. The lies about Rhaegar's honor, the whispers that Lyanna ran off with him, the sour songs about the rebellion, all tools in the hands of the mightiest houses to silence their enemies. If Bran could reroute those lies, then maybe Westeros could reset on truth. One night in Winterfell, Ned stood before Bran's bedside, a faint wind stirring heavy curtains. The boy slept, face taut with dreams. Ned whispered by the hearth, "Remember the Tower of Joy. See the dagger of reed in Howland's hand." He let silence stretch, then retreated. Soon Bran awoke blinking, staring at the ceiling. In the days after, Bran's eyes held new weight. When he spoke, he phrased things not in memory but in certainty. He told Robb of the true timing of Arthur Dayne's last swing. He told Sansa the real words Lyanna whispered. The Stark children listened. The small folk listened. The realm listened, but alongside listening they doubted. Accusations flew. "You tamper with the past," cried members of the small council. "You turn dreams into propaganda." Ned held, firm behind the scenes, whispering that truth is not what people tell you, it is what you guard. And Bran, guided, became that guardian, the child whose dreams bore witness to history's fractures and whose mind held the power to bind them back into integrity. The first tremors of revolution would come not from swords, but from memory itself, and Westeros would never know the difference until it was too late. When the changes in Westeros's history first began to manifest in daylight, it wasn't in the halls of the powerful. It was in whispers. The fishmongers at White Harbor began repeating a slightly different story of the rebellion. At first it was a slip of the tongue, a reworded detail. Rhaegar Targaryen hadn't abducted Lyanna Stark. He had hidden her. Then another merchant claimed that Ned Stark had once saved Robert from a blade meant for his throat, not the other way around. When the rumors reached Winterfell, Ned realized Bran's visions had broken through the invisible wall between memory and reality. History was no longer a story told by victors. It was alive, rewriting itself from the roots up. At the Citadel, chaos rippled quietly beneath the marble floors. Firesters in grey and white robes debated in candle-lit chambers, clutching scrolls that now contradicted each other. "The records of Aerys's last days," one whispered, "are altered. Aerys never spoke the words about burning them all. Now it says he wept for his city." Another shook his head violently. "Blasphemy! I copied the original text myself." This is someone's trick. Yet every attempt to restore the true version failed. Pages turned to dust, ink vanished mid-sentence, and in their place, new words formed like ghosts etching themselves into parchment. The Citadel's ravens carried letters across the realm, warning of a disturbance in the continuity of knowledge. Meanwhile, Bran's condition grew stranger. Each time he slept, he awoke drenched in sweat, whispering fragments of conversation from centuries ago. Sometimes he spoke in voices that weren't his own. Sometimes he cried out in languages he couldn't know. Ned, watching from his chair by the fire, realized his son wasn't merely seeing the past anymore. He was inhabiting it. And if he could walk inside memory, then Ned could speak through him to the shadows of kings and queens long dead. He began carefully, guiding Bran toward the moments that mattered most. The rebellion's spark, Robert's betrayal, the Lannisters' quiet power grab after the war. It started as whispers in Bran's sleep, but soon the visions bled into his waking hours. "Father," he said one morning, voice distant, "the Mad King didn't kill your father out of madness. Someone whispered to him that the North plotted rebellion months before you ever rode south." Ned's breath caught. "That wasn't in any chronicle." "Who?" he asked. Bran blinked as if looking through time. "A man with a lion's brooch and a serpent's smile." Ned froze. "A Lannister. Maybe even Tywin himself. He couldn't prove it, not yet. But if history itself was being corrected through Bran, the Game of Thrones was changing forever. The truth could destroy every alliance built on lies." Ned's mind raced. He imagined Robert's fury if he learned that Tywin Lannister had engineered Aerys's madness, that his entire rebellion had been a manipulation to crown him while erasing the Targaryen bloodline. Robert would burn the Lannisters to ash, and the realm with them. But perhaps, Ned thought grimly, that was the justice the realm deserved. In King's Landing, the shift in history began to feel like witchcraft. Jaime Lannister stood before the Iron Throne one morning, watching sunlight dance across its blades. The hall seemed quieter than usual, though the same courtiers buzzed with false laughter. He turned to the White Book, the Kingsguard's record of oaths, and found his name written differently. The ink shimmered faintly, as if it had been touched by moonlight. "Sir Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, breaker of oaths." But now beneath it new words had appeared. He struck not for glory but for mercy. He saved 1,000,000 from fire. Jaime blinked, his throat tightening. "Who wrote this?" he demanded. The scribe trembled. "It wrote itself, sir." Cersei raged when she heard. "They're rewriting our legacy," she shouted, flinging goblets across her chamber. "Today they call him a savior. Tomorrow they'll call our father a butcher." She summoned Qyburn and whispered her darkest fears. "Find me the source. I don't care if it's old gods, new gods, or some Stark witchcraft. Whoever plays with memory must die." Qyburn bowed deeply. "And if it's already inside the boy's mind?" Cersei's lips curved in a cold smile. "Then we burn the boy." But Ned anticipated this. Bran's gift, his curse, was too powerful to remain hidden for long. The whispers of his visions had reached too many ears. When Samwell Tarly stumbled across altered manuscripts at the Night's Watch Library, he wrote to Jon Snow in the north. "Something's wrong with the records," he said. "Events are changing, as if the world itself forgot what truly happened." Jon didn't understand at first, but when Bran looked at him one evening and said, "You were never a bastard," Jon's entire body went cold. Bran showed him, through visions painted in air and flame. Lyanna's tears, Rhaegar's crown of rubies, the whisper of "promise me." Ned. Jon felt the world tilt beneath his feet. His blood wasn't Stark and Snow. It was Targaryen and ice intertwined. And as Bran rewove the threads of truth, Ned felt both relief and dread. If the world learned this truth, Robert would kill Jon before the sun rose. So Ned did what he always did. He tried to protect the boy. "Bran," he said quietly one night, "there are truths that must wait. The realm isn't ready." But Bran only looked at him with eyes that weren't his own. "The realm will never be ready," he whispered. "It must remember what it forgot." The next day in Old Town, the Citadel's highest council convened in panic. They debated burning the altered histories, sealing them beneath stone. But every attempt failed. A maester who tried to destroy the rewritten scrolls found his hands blistered as if from frostbite. Another lost his voice entirely. They realized it wasn't just words on parchment changing, it was the fabric of time itself. "Someone," said Archmaester Marwyn darkly, "is speaking to the past." Ned's plan had grown beyond him now. Each night he tried to steer Bran's visions, to contain the rewriting. But the river of memory had broken its banks. Bran began dreaming of futures too, of wars that hadn't yet begun, thrones that hadn't yet fallen. "Father," he murmured once, "if we change enough, perhaps the Mad King will never be born." Ned froze. That wasn't correction. That was erasure, and yet, wasn't that what Westeros needed? A chance to start again? without bloodlines poisoned by vengeance and lies. The thought tempted him more than he wanted to admit. But every correction came with a cost. In dawn, the Martell's chronicles began to fade. In the Iron Islands, entire songs vanished overnight. Memory was rewriting itself unevenly, swallowing some truths whole while amplifying others. History was collapsing into something new, a Westeros forged not by swords but by remembrance. Ned stood once more beneath the heart tree, snow gathering at his boots. "Old gods," he whispered, "I only wanted truth." "Not this." The wind sighed through the branches. For a moment he thought he heard a reply, soft, ancient, sorrowful. "Truth and peace cannot share the same throne." As the snows deepened and Bran's eyes turned pale as the weirwood's face, Ned understood the terrible balance he had broken. To save the realm from lies, he might have doomed it to a war of memory, where every house, every bloodline fought not for land or gold, but for the right to define what had been, and far to the south. As the first raven bearing news of these shifting histories reached King's Landing, Cersei read its contents in silence. Her lips curled, her eyes hard as glass. "If the North seeks to rewrite the world," she said, "then we'll remind them who writes it in blood." The war of memory had begun not with armies, but with parchment and whispers. Lords and ladies across Westeros received strange reports. Documents rewritten, lineages restructured, ancient crimes exposed. The noble houses scrambled to preserve their legacies. House Lannister's archivists were ordered to burn any conflicting records. House Tyrell bribed Meisters to insert favorable passages into family chronicles. In Dorne, the Martells held emergency councils to prepare for the fallout of restored history that painted Elia's death not as a tragedy of war, but as a calculated execution. Across the continent, paranoia bloomed like wildfire in dry grass, but in the north the storm had already passed that point. Bran's visions were no longer fragmented images. They were doorways, open, clear, and echoing with voices of the past. Every time he closed his eyes, he didn't just observe history. He walked through it. He watched Tywin Lannister order the sack of King's Landing, not with cold necessity, but vindictive pride. He saw the mountain raise his blade over Elia Martell, heard her screams echo through stone halls. And worst of all, he saw the lies that followed, lies Ned himself had allowed to fester, lies that kept the realm from justice. When Bran told Arya what he had seen, she stood still for a long time. "They made us believe Elia was a casualty," she said, voice flat. "They murdered her like animals, like they did to Mother. And no one was punished." Bran nodded. "No one even remembered." Arya looked at him with fire in her eyes. "Then let's make them remember." Jon Snow, still reeling from the truth of his parentage, found himself caught between two worlds. He had grown up as Ned Stark's son, shaped by the North's cold honor. But now he knew he was Aegon Targaryen, born of fire and prophecy. Yet even that truth no longer felt stable. Bran's visions were changing timelines faster than Jon could understand. Some nights, Bran would speak of futures where Jon took the throne. Other nights he'd whisper of paths where Jon fell to Daenerys' dragonfire, branded a traitor. Jon confronted Ned one evening near the crypts. "Is this really about truth?" he asked. "Or are we just creating a version of history that suits us?" Ned looked tired, older than he should have. This was never about control. It was about setting things right. Jon's jaw clenched. Right for who? The confrontation between truth and power was no longer theoretical. In King's Landing, Cersei struck back. She announced a royal decree criminalizing any attempt to alter or falsify the realm's written records. Anyone caught spreading false memory would be executed for treason. Scribes were rounded up. Storytellers vanished. Libraries were locked under Lannister guard. But the harder she tried to suppress the truth, the faster it spread. Bran's visions had become wildfire in people's minds. Sansa Stark, now Lady of Winterfell, used the power of Bran's memories strategically. She sent ravens to old allies, revealing hidden truths that changed allegiances overnight. She exposed Lord Royce's betrayal at the Vale. She revealed how the Boltons had orchestrated the Red Wedding with Lannister aid long before the battle ever began. People who once doubted her words now found themselves confronted with undeniable memory. She didn't have to prove anything. Bran showed them. In the Riverlands, an uprising began, not with swords but with stories. Small folk marched with chants not of rebellion but of truth. They carried signs bearing names like Alia Martell, Rhaenys, and even Lyanna Stark. "Remembrance is resistance," they cried. The Tullys, ever torn between honor and survival, struggled to contain the unrest. Lord Edmure tried diplomacy, but when Bran's dreams revealed that he had once betrayed a secret envoy sent by Robb Stark, even his bannermen turned on him. Meanwhile, Tyrion Lannister watched the realm unravel from Dragonstone. Daenerys brooded in silence, her dragons circling the skies. "So the past is a battlefield now," she said one night. Tyrion nodded grimly. "And your house stands accused of more crimes than most." Daenerys tilted her head. "Are they true?" Tyrion didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the fire. "Does it matter? If the realm believes it, it becomes real." She understood the threat Bran posed, not just to her claim, but to her very existence. Her father's crimes, long buried under layers of silence and pity, were now being exposed in detail. Every mad whisper, every scream, every burnt child. She wasn't just the last Targaryen anymore. She was the daughter of a madman who had earned his name. She looked at Tyrion, eyes narrow. "We burn his memory," she said, "or we burn the world that remembers, but you couldn't kill memory. Not when it walked in the body of a boy who dreamed like a god." Bran, now pale and distant as the moon, barely spoke anymore. He spent hours staring at the weirwood tree, murmuring to ghosts. He watched timelines like threads on a loom, and with every shift he created ripples, some small, others catastrophic. One night he whispered to Mira Reed, "Your father lied about the Tower of Joy." Mira's face went pale. "He said he saved my mother. That's why she married him." Bran shook his head. "She died in the tower. The woman you called mother was someone else." Mira wept for a memory that had never been real, and that was the true cost. Every correction destroyed something precious. Families shattered, friendships broke. The foundations of Westeros cracked under the weight of forgotten truths. And Ned, once the most honorable man in the realm, now stood at the center of it all. He had meant only to guide Bran, to prevent the realm from living in lies. But now history bent around them, reshaping the world in ways no sword ever could. South of the Neck, in the quiet halls of Harrenhal, a secret council of lords met to discuss a path forward. They called themselves the Keepers of the Flame, arbiters of the old truth, those who wished to preserve the history that had held the realm together. "This boy Stark threatens more than thrones," said Lord Grafton. "He threatens our reality." They plotted to destroy Bran, to end the visions before the realm became ungovernable. But the boy was not alone. Arya, who had heard the whispers, became his silent blade. When the first assassin arrived at Winterfell in the guise of a raven handler, she slit his throat before he uttered a word. When a maester tried to poison Bran's tea, she fed it to a rat and watched it die in seconds. "They'll keep coming," she told Sansa. Sansa nodded. "Then let them come. We have the truth on our side." Arya didn't respond. She didn't believe in truth anymore. Only loyalty. And in the shadows beyond memory, something ancient stirred. For every truth Bran uncovered, some deeper force awoke. The old gods, once content to sleep in roots and snow, began to whisper again. "He sees too far," one said. "He remembers too much," another murmured. And the trees groaned under the weight of it. Ned, watching it all unfold, realized the game had changed forever. No longer about thrones or crowns. Now the question was far more dangerous. Who controls the past? Because whoever did would control everything that followed. The realm was unraveling, not with fire and sword, but with memory. Memories that bled through scrolls, haunted dreams, and corrupted bloodlines. Where once power was forged through gold and steel, now it bent before the raw, unfiltered truth Bran Stark carried like a curse. And Ned, who had once guided this process with a steady hand, now saw himself standing at the edge of something far more dangerous than war, a world where reality itself was shifting beneath the feet of kings. In the north, Winterfell became a fortress of truths. Lords came not to swear fealty, but to plead their innocence. Each one feared what Bran might see. "I never betrayed House Stark," claimed Lord Wyllis Manderly. "My ravens were intercepted." Bran looked through him with eyes cold and blank. "Your raven flew. You let it fly." Manderly paled, his jaw trembling. That was decades ago. But in this new Westeros, nothing stayed buried. Every betrayal had a name. Every lie had a witness. Sansa, hardened by court and cruelty, used these visions to reshape the North. She exiled those who had once smiled at the Boltons, replaced them with bannermen who bore clean records, untainted pasts. She called it justice. Others called it quiet tyranny. The lines blurred with each new revelation. Arya watched silently from the shadows, her blade dancing more often than before. She understood. Memory was a weapon now, more dangerous than any dagger she carried. And Bran, her brother, was the greatest weapon of them all. But far to the south, others began to strike back. The Faith of the Seven, seeing the chaos, declared Bran Stark a heretic, a boy touched by dark magic. The High Septon stood before thousands in the Great Sept and thundered, "Only the gods judge. And this child seeks to usurp them." Religious hysteria surged. Pilgrims marched with torches. Rumors swirled that Bran could see sins committed in secret chambers, that he had watched the Faith itself turn a blind eye to Lannister atrocities during Robert's rebellion. In desperation, the High Septon sent an envoy to Daenerys Targaryen. She listened, half amused, half curious. "And you want me to do what?" she asked. "Burn a crippled boy in the north?" The Septon bowed. "Burn the infection before it spreads." Tyrion's voice broke the silence. "Your Grace, if Bran Stark is shaping the realm's history, then every choice you've made could be unmade by morning. Every crime justified. Every claim destroyed." Daenerys's eyes flickered toward the fire. "Then we must strike before he rewrites my birthright." She dispatched her dragons northward, not to burn Winterfell, but to scout, to intimidate, to remind the north that fire still ruled. Dragon circled the skies above the wall, his shadow stretching for miles. In Winterfell, children wept at the sight. Bran merely blinked and whispered, "He remembers old Valyria. He does not want to burn." Not yet. The masters thought the boy mad. But Ned heard something else in Bran's voice, a quiet warning. Even the dragons feared what was coming. Ned tried to contain it. He ordered the old records sealed, the weirwood trees left alone. But it was too late. Bran no longer needed guidance. He spoke less, slept more, and dreamed with terrifying clarity. He began walking into people's memories uninvited. Rhaegar's final breath, Catelyn Stark's scream at the Red Wedding, even Ned's own youth. He began rewriting the people themselves, and they felt it. Jon Snow woke one night gasping, tears streaming down his face. "I was never a bastard," he whispered. "I remember now. I remember her arms, her voice." Sansa watched him in horror. "Bran gave that to you?" Jon nodded. "I didn't ask, he just showed me." Later that night he looked into the fire and said, "But I don't know if it's real. I want it to be. But what if I'm living a memory that wasn't mine?" Elsewhere others suffered deeper fractures. Cersei, clinging to her throne in King's Landing, watched helplessly as portraits of her ancestors faded from the Red Keep's gallery. Names vanished from stone, lineages dissolved. When she screamed at Grand Maester Pycelle for answers, he could only tremble. "Even the stones forget, Your Grace, even the stones." She sent riders north again, this time with poison meant for Bran Stark. None returned. The Keepers of the Flame, those southern lords terrified of memory, formed an alliance. They pledged not to kill Bran, but to bind him. They summoned witches from Asshai, blood mages from Volantis, anyone who could silence visions. One of them, a masked woman called Ilara, whispered that there was only one way: shatter the boy's anchor to the living world. The one he calls father. Ned felt the blade long before it came. In the crypts of Winterfell, as he lit a candle by Lyanna's tomb, a man stepped from the shadows. "You were supposed to be dead," he said softly. "History was safer when you weren't part of it." Ned fought, sword to steel, but he was older now. The blade found his side, then his shoulder. He fell against cold stone, the wind outside howling as if it too remembered. But the man didn't finish him. He only whispered, "Tell your son the past must stay buried." Then he vanished. Ned survived. Barely. And when Bran saw the blood, he said nothing. He only looked toward the heart tree and whispered, "They want to silence me, but they don't understand." Arya pressed a cloth to Ned's wound. "Understand what?" Bran turned to her, eyes pale and lost. "That the past doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to me." And then came the true fracture. In a dream, Bran touched something he shouldn't have, a shadow in time, a moment buried deep. It was a vision of the children of the forest, and what they did to create the Night King. But this time the story was different. Bran saw not creation but corruption. The first men had offered themselves, willingly. They had asked to be turned to gain power against the Andals. The children had only obliged. The Night King hadn't been born a villain. He had been a hero. Bran woke screaming. That single truth broke something deep within the magic of Westeros. The wall cracked, not fully, but enough. Cold wind seeped through. And south of the wall a figure stirred beneath frozen ground, blinking with blue eyes that had no right to open again. Memory, it turned out, was not just a mirror. It was a door. And Bran Stark had opened it. The wall-wept ice-car cracks split its ancient surface like veins through old marble. They started as hairline fractures, barely visible in the white shimmer. But every day they deepened. Cold winds slipped through sharper than any blade. Ravens fled from Eastwatch. Night's Watch brothers reported strange noises beneath their feet, whispers in a language no man had heard in thousands of years. One ranger, eyes wide with terror, said he dreamed of a figure beneath the ice whispering his name. When he woke, his fingers were frostbitten even though the fire was still burning. In Winterfell, Bran did not sleep. He sat beneath the heart tree for 3 days straight, unmoving. Snow collected on his shoulders. His skin turned pale, almost translucent, but he said nothing. Arya came to check on him once, kneeling beside him in silence. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away without looking. "You shouldn't have shown them that vision," she said. "The past was dangerous enough. But now you've brought something forward," Bran whispered. "It was always coming. I didn't bring it. I remembered it." South of the wall, panic spread faster than the cold. Villages along the Gift emptied in the night. Wildlings, newly settled after years of war, vanished into the trees. The Night's Watch sent urgent ravens to every corner of the realm. The dead are stirring. Most were ignored. After all, the long night had ended, hadn't it? The Night King was dead. Arya Stark had killed him. The prophecy was fulfilled. Or so they thought, but the dead don't obey prophecies. They remember pain, and now they remembered everything. Bran had seen the truth in his vision. The Night King had once been a man who chose transformation, a pact with the children of the forest to become something more. He wasn't born of evil, but desperation, a protector turned weapon. And in revealing that, Bran had torn open the oldest wound Westeros had ever known. That knowledge stirred something beneath the snow, a buried will, ancient and broken, that clawed toward the light once more. Ned Stark, still recovering from the assassination attempt, felt the change in the air. He watched Bran with growing fear. His son no longer blinked like a boy. He barely moved. "Bran," he said quietly one night, "you must stop looking backward." "The past isn't safe." Bran turned and in a voice deeper than his own whispered, "There is no backward, only before." Then he collapsed. When Bran awoke, something had changed in him. He could no longer separate visions from reality. He spoke in broken timelines, talking to dead men as if they were present. He called Arya Nymeria, then seconds later asked for Robb. "He was right here," he whispered. "Didn't you see him?" Sansa watched, terrified. "We've lost him," she said. But Arya shook her head. "No, he's just further ahead than we are." In King's Landing, Daenerys prepared for war, not just with armies, but with fire. "If the boy has opened the door to the dead, then we burn the door shut," she said coldly. Tyrion argued. "The North will see that as a declaration of war. They'll rise against you." She turned to him, unblinking. "Then we burn the North too." Drogon roared overhead, sensing her fury, but Daenerys wasn't the only one moving. The Keepers of the Flame were now gathering openly. Dozens of lords, bound by fear, met in secret to craft their counterattack. Not all of them feared magic, but all feared irrelevance. "If this continues," said Lord Rosby, "then no family's legacy is safe. He's peeling back generations. If he can rewrite our fathers, what's stopping him from rewriting us?" They sent word to the Citadel. "Revive the oldest rites. Blood magic, shadow binding, old Valyrian sorcery long outlawed." The Maesters refused at first, until the snow reached Old Town. For the first time in living memory, frost touched the roots of the high tower. The dead had begun to remember the South. They acted quickly, deep beneath the Citadel, in chambers untouched for centuries. They pulled ancient scrolls from stone, runes written in dragon's tongue. Forgotten charms designed to bind memory itself. If he sees through time, the Archmeister said, then we blind him. Their plan was simple: sever Bran's connection to the Weirwood network, close the door between his mind and the realm's memory. But it required a sacrifice. They sent for Hodor, or at least what remained of him. Bran had stored part of Hodor's soul in the trees, anchored there during the last Great War. It was a tether, a memory Bran had never let go. The Meisters planned to use it as bait. He loved him, one whispered. He won't resist if he hears his voice. And they were right. When the weirwood trees across Westeros began whispering, "Hold the door," Bran collapsed in agony. He screamed for Hodor, for the past, for the life he had touched and ruined. The Maesters chanted. The trees shook. The skies turned black, but they underestimated him. Bran didn't just remember Hodor, he was Hodor. He had always been inside that mind. And when the Maesters tried to sever the tether, they found themselves in a loop, trapped in a vision of the hold the door moment, reliving it over and over. Their minds broke. The ritual failed. Bran survived. But something else came through. Something followed the chant, riding its echo like a wave, a shadow of the Night King. Not the same body, not the same face, but the same presence, cold, unforgiving, memory made flesh. It moved south, silent and unseen, a whisper in the bones of Westeros. And wherever it passed, people remembered things they had never lived at. Farmers began dreaming of being knights. Knights wept for crimes they had never committed. Children called out names from the age of heroes. The past wasn't just invading records and dreams anymore. It was infecting souls. Ned realized the truth too late. Bran wasn't just revealing history. He was collapsing it, all of it. Every memory, every legend, every lie, folding into the present. There was no linear time anymore. Only convergence. And at the center of it all, a boy who could no longer tell when or who he was. Bran stood in the snow and said, "I am the three-eyed raven. I am the Night King. I am Hodor. I am Jon Snow. I am Rhaegar. I am Mira. I am no one. I am everyone." Sansa turned to Ned, face pale. "What do we do?" Ned looked north toward the wall. "We end it." "How?" "We go to the beginning." "End it." "How?" "We go to the beginning." Winterfell was silent, cloaked in snow that seemed to fall not from the sky but from time itself. The trees whispered memories older than the bricks they stood among. People walked the halls in a daze, unsure if the lives they remembered were truly their own. Servants recalled pasts they never lived. Lords dreamt of battles they never fought. Even the wolves seemed unsure which direction the wind came from. The castle was no longer a fortress. It was a vessel, adrift in the flood of collapsing history. Bran hadn't moved from beneath the heart tree in days. His body was there, but his mind scattered across centuries. Sometimes he whispered riddles. Sometimes he wept. Once he laughed, an eerie, hollow sound that made even Arya hesitate. Sansa had ordered the tree watched day and night, but no one dared get too close. The branches now bent lower, their white bark bleeding sap that shimmered like silver in the moonlight. Ravens clustered in the branches, silent, eyes glowing faintly blue. Ned stood in the crypts, his hand resting on the cold stone of Lyanna's tomb. He had come here not for memory, but for resolve. "You died for a secret," he whispered. "I tried to protect it, but now the secret has consumed everything." He turned as Jon entered, snow still clinging to his black cloak. "The dead are rising," Jon said simply. "But they're not attacking. They're remembering." Ned nodded slowly. "Because they were promised something." Jon frowned. "What?" Ned stared ahead. "A beginning." And so the decision was made. If Bran had opened a door to the past, they would walk through it, not to stop him, but to anchor him, to remind him that even memory needs boundaries. With the help of the few remaining children of the forest, found deep in the Frostfangs, they prepared the ritual. It required blood, Stark blood, a willing soul to enter the stream of time and guide Bran back. Jon volunteered, Sansa argued. "We need you." "The realm, he's my brother," Jon said. "He's our brother. He saved this world once. Now I save him." Arya handed him her dagger. "For the part of him that refuses to come back." Jon nodded without hesitation. They performed the ritual beneath the heart tree. The children drew ancient runes in the snow with ash and salt. They slit Jon's palm and pressed it to the roots. Bran's body trembled violently. His eyes rolled back. The ravens scattered. The sky darkened, and Jon was pulled into the stream. Time wasn't a river. It was a storm. Jon fell through it, tumbling past lives and memories, faces he recognized and others he didn't. He saw Rhaegar tuning a harp. He saw Lyanna scream through blood. He saw Ned, younger, standing in the Tower of Joy with tears in his eyes. He saw the Mad King laugh. He saw the Night King kneel before a weirwood and beg to be remembered. And then he saw Bran, or what Bran had become. He floated in the center of a whirlpool of light and shadow. His body was no longer a boy's. It was formed of faces, voices, memories. He was 1,000 people speaking at once. Jon stepped forward. "Bran," he said firmly. No response. "Bran, it's me." Bran's eyes flickered. "You died at the wall," he said, voice fragmented. "No, you became king. No, you were never born." Jon stepped closer. "You're lost. You need to come back." "I am back," Bran whispered. "I am everywhere." "You're not supposed to be," Jon snapped. "You were meant to see, not be." Bran stared at him. For a second, something clear surfaced. "It's too late. I saw the truth. Time isn't a line. It's a wound. And I made it bleed." Jon's voice softened. "Then let's close it." But Bran shook his head. "I tried to fix it. I thought if people remembered the truth, they'd stop fighting. But they didn't. They used it. They twisted it. The more truth I gave them, the more blood they spilled." Jon looked around, the storm of memory spinning endlessly. "You said the dead were promised a beginning. What did you mean?" Bran looked down, ashamed. "To fix the world. I gave them memory. I made them remember who they were before death. I made them want to live again." "You gave them hope," Jon whispered. "I gave them hunger," Bran corrected. "They remember love, family, vengeance. And they want it back. Not just their names. Their place." Jon stepped back in horror. "You woke the dead with desire." "Yes," Bran said. "And now they're walking south. Not to destroy, but to replace." Jon clenched his fists. "You need to stop it." "I can't," Bran said, his voice barely human. "I'm not strong enough. I've become too many things. I don't know how to be just Bran." Jon stared at him. "Then let me take some of it." Bran blinked. "What?" "Share the burden," Jon said. "Let me carry part of the past. We'll divide it. Not one mind, but two. Hanker each other." Bran hesitated. "Or we both disappear," Jon said. "And the dead take everything." Bran nodded once, and so they did it. In the storm of memory, Bran reached out. Jon took his hand. Light burst between them. Searing pain. A flood of history. Jon saw everything, it nearly killed him. But he held on, and just like that, the storm began to calm. In Winterfell, Bran opened his eyes. So did Jon. They both gasped, and the snows stopped falling. But it wasn't over, because in the north, the dead had reached the wall, and they were not hostile, they were organized, and at their front stood a man with no name, whose eyes were not blue but golden. He did not raise his sword. He raised a banner, white, empty, the symbol of a world ready to be rewritten. A world ready to be rewritten.